All right, so a special edition of Louder with Crowder today. And I know when people think, oh, this is a montage edition, it's like before Happy Days went away. Right before the Jump the Shark was a montage. But this is actually something that we haven't done before, but a lot of people have asked me to talk about some of my favorite guests that we've had on the show. And sometimes there's a little bit more that's happened behind the scenes that we just don't really get to fill you guys in on. And I do have some favorite guests, some standout guests. So we're going to give you the top 10 guests that have appeared on Louder with Crowder and why they're top 10 to me. And then I'd love to hear from you who your favorite guests have been or who you'd like to see on the show. Comment below. We always want to hear from you. So number 10, a guest I loved having on the show just because he was talk about a gentle giant, world's strongest man 4 times, and then 4-time Arnold Classic strongest man, so 8 times really, Brian Shaw. Maybe it's 7. Who cares at this point? The point is he's really strong.
And
that's
huge.
Episode 357, you can go reference it for Mug Club members. A lot of these are on YouTube, but some of them are behind Mug Club only.
Yep.
The full version or sometimes an extended version. And the reason Brian Shaw was so interesting to me was because not only was he big and obviously strong and intimidating, and I soiled myself, but I've been really fortunate to interview excellent people who are as a matter of fact, I was trying to tell an older relative about Brian Shaw. She was like, well, I guess that would make sense how you're impressed by him being strong. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's not about the strength. Do you understand what this guy has done to achieve this, to become the best at anything? And talking with him about it, you can see a borderline, and I mean this in a good way, obsessive personality about attention to detail and quality. And you see this with any of the people we've interviewed who are at the top level of their field. And one thing for me that really stood out, episode 357 with Brian Shaw, I always wanted to ask this. 4-time world's strongest man was also the runner-up more times than anyone else against his biggest rival, Zydrunas Zavikas, I think is how it's pronounced. And before the torch was passed to Brian Shaw, it wasn't even close. This Zydrunas guy was in a league of his own, and Brian Shaw kind of, he evaded it a little bit, but I asked him, he finally just really was, he was as candid as could be, and that was a breakthrough moment in that interview. Enjoy. You went on to win 4 times, but like you said, Zavikas was your main rival. And there is a moment, I remember when I was watching World's Strongest Man, I can't remember which year it was, but it was a log lift. I think it was the Austrian Oak. And as far as I remember it, no one else had lifted it yet. Some kind of overhead lift. And then I think you were the first one to do it. And you got a rep or 2. And then I remember Zavikas getting, and because that was his lift, listen, different strongman, and he just repped it out like it was a baby. Again, I don't say that because then you went and you came back and you won. This is not a slight at all. But what was that moment like for you? Because it was so mind-blowing how strong he was in very specific facets back then.
Sure. We, I mean, there was, I don't know exactly what moment you're talking about there, but there was definitely times where he had events, especially with the log, because that's, I mean, he's been pretty open saying that's been his favorite lift by far overall. And so he had those moments with the log, whereas I had kind of those moments with lifting stones, which is more of kind of my specialty lift, where, he couldn't do those things. So in a lot of ways, I think that's what made our rivalry great, is that he had different strengths than I did. And it was always trying to keep up, for me, keep up with him the best I could on like his best events. And then the same for him. And I think that we forced each other to get better, which made it, it made it great, really.
Yeah. It really was an era that was very fun to watch. And I just asked because I always wonder what it's like to be like the strongest guy everywhere you go. And then in one event, one guy is just, you're like, oh, I like it for a little bit.
One word is frustrating. I don't like anything. Yeah, I never liked that. It was, because you put all this hard training into doing it. And then, if you go and have an event like that where he would do so well, and I had trained so hard to be better at it, it was just kind of like, man, you walk away frustrated from moments like that for sure.
Still pretty strong in my book. Number 9, this is going to be one that might surprise some people. The first time Nick DiPaolo was on. And this is episode 73. It was just a big deal for me because he's one of my favorite stand-up comedians ever. So I grew up watching him. And as a matter of fact, when I used to watch him, I would almost feel bad about myself because I thought, I will never, ever be able to achieve with it. I will never be as good of a stand-up comedian as Nick DiPaolo.
I did that. I did that one. In art, I would whenever I was drawing when I was younger, I would always like look at like the best, and I'd be like, I'm never gonna get there. Like
I'm just gonna quit and start smoking crack. And he was also really nice too, Nick. He was really nice. I got to know him on a personal level. We spent like an hour on the phone, and he didn't disappoint. It was just bust a gut, pee yourself, funny. So episode 73. It was hard to even pick. Just take your pick. Nick DiPaolo, hysterical. It was me basically meeting one of my comedy idols.
Do you follow mixed martial arts at all? I know you're a sports guy, but do you follow like the UFC?
I choked out my wife last night. Like, here's a good example. Hillary, at that black radio station saying that she had hot sauce.
Oh, my gosh. We ran with that. We had that on a loop like a morphine drip.
That's the best way to lose votes with black. She was pandering. Everybody in the room know it. When they said, what are you carrying in your purse? They would have had more respect for her if she said, well, thanks to your people, I carry mace. and
You are right in that mix, but yeah, Klein and Carlin and obviously Cosby until, the kind of whole rape thing. But there are people like...
What happened to Cosby?
Well, he raped the equivalent to a small Haitian village. So... I
met him. I think he is guilty because I met him once. I shook his hand after a show in Atlantic City about 15 years ago. Next thing you know, I wake up, I'm wearing nothing but a Temple T-shirt, and instead there's a bunch of pudding pop wrappers stuck to my back. And I don't know what happened.
All right, and clocking in at number 8, and you might think, why isn't he higher up on the list? It's just hard to make a list. They're just numbered because we have to. George St-Pierre. George St-Pierre, episode 134. Not only is he my favorite fighter of all time, if I had to pick one, would probably be George St-Pierre. And of course, because I'm from Montreal, and I know a lot of people, their eyes are glazing over. Oh, UFC fight. It's not about the sport of fighting. It's not about the UFC. If you go watch a documentary on George St-Pierre, there's one called, I think, The DNA of George St-Pierre. It's done by the same people who do all these Discovery Channel films, like about wolves. Very, very well done. Again, you realize the same thing that you see with Brian Shaw. The consistency with people who are at a very, very high level are people who are self-conscious to a degree, but confident. They all realize they could do something great. They said, okay, I believe I can be the best at this. And then the level of discipline that most people will never fully comprehend. But my favorite moment from this, in episode 134, George St-Pierre. So he was on the program. We couldn't get Skype working, so he called in. And there was a special that he did on the UFC Countdown where his French-Canadian mom in French was complaining when the cameraman came in saying, don't show them my dusty basement. So George St-Pierre is known to be a little bit robotic or stiff because he's very professional. A lot of people don't realize it's just the way French Canadians are. It almost seems like a fake accent. That's how half of my family sounds. And the moment that stood out to me was when my mom asked George St-Pierre if the basement was still dusty. And if you can speak French, it's hard to fully translate. You can read the subtitles, but he relaxes and he actually goes into talking and almost justifying, like, no. The thing is, my mom was just upset about this, and and it became a really personal conversation between my mom and UFC legend, possibly the best combat athlete ever, George St-Pierre, episode 134.
Can I ask you, ma mère, she has a question for you in French. Can you take one question?
Yes.
She's a super fan. Okay, ma.
Allô, Georges, je suis probablement un de tes plus grands fans. Je t'adore.
Hey, ma, plus proche à le microphone, là. She's freaking. She's nervous for people watching. Get up close to the microphone.
OK. So, j'ai regardé un reportage qu'ils ont fait sur toi. Puis, ta pauvre mère était bien insultée à cause de son sous-sol, que quelqu'un lui a dit qu'il y avait bien de la poussière. Puis, elle a dit, c'est pas de ma faute, c'est parce qu'ils l'ont pas fini. Fait que je veux savoir s'ils ont fini le sous-sol pour ta mère.
Non, ils n'ont pas fini parce que le sous-sol, en fait, hein, on le garde comme une salle de jeu pour les enfants à ma sœur.
Ah.
Donc, on ne sait pas encore. Les enfants vont grandir un jour. Donc, si on décide de mettre des chambres ou d'autres installations, ben il va falloir le changer dans quelques années. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on le garde comme ça, parce qu'il y a un punch-in bag, il y a des trucs, des jouets pour les enfants. Donc, si on décide de le changer, ça va être de l'argent perdu pour rien. She asked me about the.
Yeah, also
the
she was
basement of
asking
my mother.
about the basement because your mom. By the way, for people who don't know, this is such a French Canadian thing. Georges knows this. Like French Canadians, they keep their houses so clean. Jared, you know that with my mom. She's like she can't handle it. And Georges St-Pierre's mom was so mad in a special that they showed a basement which was dusty. So my mom asked if it was still dusty, and Georges said yes because they're keeping it as a play area for the kids, right?
Yeah, you keep it for the kid because there's like it's like a playground for the kid. But if we finish it and we make like rooms and the walls and everything, right now it's gonna be useless because we want it to be for the kids, for my sister's kids. But if maybe in a few years when they grow up, I guess my parents are gonna be willing to change. I even offered her to pay for the renovation and everything, and she convinced me that right now it's a bad idea. So.
Just because she doesn't want to have to clean it up again. Because French Canadians clean up everything. As you're finished eating, they clean up the plates.
She was very very insulted that they say was dusty basement, but it is my mom. My mom is like that. She wants everything be looking good on camera and this.
That's it. My mom, we were sitting there watching the special, and my mom's like, oh. She's like, poor woman. I'm like, Mom, are you not watching the greatest fighter of all time? The countdown is about him fighting. And she wouldn't stop about the dust in the basement and how bad she felt.
It was about the dusty basement, not the fighter.
No. But then she watched the fight because she's like, I want to watch him. His mother care about the dust in the basement. I'm going to watch to support him. So you never know how you'll get a new fan.
That's funny.
By the way, the basement is still dusty. Number 7, Thomas Sowell. This was episode 310. And, a couple of reasons why. First off, this was the first of the sort of newer media new school podcast to have Thomas Sowell on. He didn't do it. He's notoriously difficult to book. And then after he did this, he started doing some more shows, I believe, and really enjoyed his experience. He was just really, really easy to work with. And when it comes to economists, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone more prolific than Thomas Sowell in our generation. I grew up on him. He's a huge part of my worldview and how I've learned economics, and he's one of the number one recommendations. I've talked about John Stossel, Thomas Sowell, and of course going back to Adam Smith. Going back to that, it's a little bit tough. It's kind of like going back and reading some old-timey. Thomas Sowell brings it to now, and it's tough to pick a moment. But what was really great about Thomas Sowell was I didn't expect this. You could see him loosen up, and he was a lot of fun. He was very down to earth, and I think we got to see a side of Thomas Sowell that you don't often see. So this is episode 310, Thomas Sowell.
How does it feel to be arguably the most influential, certainly probably the most influential conservative economist of our time? I know you have to be humble, but has it set in? I mean, because you're that guy.
Well, I never contradict the opinions of people who say good things about me because there are so few of them. But I really don't try. It would be impossible to be objective about oneself, and so I never try the impossible.
Could you maybe expand on more so the myth that if not for discrimination, society would have equal representation in careers, income, education, and incarceration? Because that's the huge main tenet of leftism that's taught on campus. If not for discrimination, we'd all have these equal representation outcomes.
You put your finger on the key assumption on which it's like the keystone that holds up the whole structure, and you remove that, and they don't have very much. Age is one of those things, but what people desire to do matters.
Right.
For all I know, I might have been born, with genes that would have enabled me to become another Rudolph Nureyev as a male ballet dancer.
Okay.
If I was, it was a total waste of genes. Right. Because where I grew up, nobody ever thought about, no guys ever thought about becoming male ballet dancers. So it doesn't matter what their abilities were. It doesn't matter whether there was opposition or the gates of opportunity were wide open. They weren't going to become male ballet dancers. But what people want to do is huge.
All right, number 6. This one is that a lot of you may not even, there's no number to the episode because this is before we actually had episodes. It's not before we went daily. It's before this show was a show at all, even as a podcast. This is back when we were on radio and we used to tape our calls if we could Skype people, but we didn't really know what to do with it. So we finally learned how to record the Skype video to decent quality, and we started uploading these. So this is actually Carly Fiorina from August 7th, 2015. You can search it on YouTube. That's the only place to find it. Just Carly Fiorina, Steven Crowder. Search the channel and go through all of the suggested Young Turks videos because it'll take you a while.
At the same time.
Do you realize that half of these interviews when I was searching through YouTube as to what my interview with this person is not even the first thing that pops up?
No.
It's a bunch of random crap with no
They
views.
just stick everything over, like, they're just piling on.
They're just putting it
on.
It's like a sandwich, only we're just the bottom bread.
Exactly.
And there's top bread, there's a whole layer of ham and vegetables, and then we're like the saucer plate. That's too small for the sandwich. If you
We're the meat.
No, we're not.
We're the delicious meat in the
We
middle.
want to be the meat, but not to YouTube.
No, not YouTube.
Don't say delicious meat on this program. Carly Fiorina, here's why this stands out to me so much. We had been writing about her, so louderwithcrowder.com. A lot of people now who just watch the show don't realize the website was a lot bigger than the show for a long time, edited by Courtney Kirchhoff, and she still edits over there. Wonderful, fantastic writer. We'd been writing about Carly Fiorina for a long time. I had seen her speak at a private event and thought, wow, this woman's really impressive. And then I watched back then, during these primaries, they had the second stage debates, people who didn't necessarily make it to the first stage. And we were writing about Carly Fiorina. I called her, I think we coined the term the conservative honey badger. And then at one point we started calling her the conservative spider monkey on crack because of the way she went after Katie Couric. And so when we reached out to her people, I thought, oh no, I found out she had heard Spider Monkey on Crack, and she loved it. Turns out she liked it, and she came on the show. So she wasn't doing any podcast circuits or local radio, anything like that. And here's why this is so pivotal to me, because you don't know this when you watch this interview. She gave us this interview. She was at the event green room, I believe, or another conference room, right before, 45 minutes before she walked on stage that night, and then pulled ahead to number one in the polls. If you remember, there was a moment where Carly Fiorina just pulled ahead, and I will say it was mismanaged a little bit by some of the handlers, but no one knew who she was. She came out on stage that night, and the whole world was talking about Carly Fiorina. 45 minutes before that, this is what you see on Skype. Also, we got Carly Fiorina to say that other Republicans, the males in particular, needed to grow a pair. Watch.
Clarify your stance so that no one else is misquoting you on immigration. What would a Carly Fiorina administration do?
What I have said consistently all along is, number one, we have to secure the border. By the way, how long have we been talking about securing the border? 30 years. I mean, to be accurate, the border has not been secure for 30 years. We've been talking about it for at least 25. It's still not secure. So what does that tell you? It tells you politicians talk, and yet it never gets done. Sanctuary cities. You know how long San Francisco's been a sanctuary city? Since 1989. Everyone's going to get all fired up about this. They're going to give speeches. They're going to pass laws, and yet nothing really changes. This is why people are fed up with the political class. So number one, secure the border. This isn't rocket science. It takes money. It takes manpower. It takes technology. But mostly what it takes is to grow a pair and lead.
And I think that Carly Fiorina, if I may say so respectfully, is fine. Also, number 5, Daniel Cormier. A lot of ladies like him. So he's the current UFC light heavyweight champion.
Another big dude.
Yes. Well, actually, he's not that big. Not that big for a heavyweight. The guy could technically fight as a. Well, he's scary. No, he's about 5'10". 5'9",
oh, wow.
Fighting heavyweights, and he fought at 205 and won the title there, and then moved up. So right now he's the current lineal light heavyweight champion and UFC heavyweight champion, and he's a former Olympian. He's one of the main commentators on ESPN. It was Fox Sports 1, I think now over there at ESPN. Episode 363. I didn't think he was going to come on the show. And we've been very fortunate to have a lot of people who are not necessarily conservatives, not necessarily politically minded, come on the show, and every now and then it's a crapshoot. What I really liked about Daniel Cormier, not only was he funny, obviously, I mean, people know he's very charismatic, but he was very vulnerable. So there's a moment there, if you watch, where he talks about how scared he was before he absolutely blitzed Stipe Miocic to win the title. And he talks about this moment of the excuses he was making for himself, beforehand. And I think it's something you don't often see, because when you're doing the UFC countdowns, right, you're trying to intimidate the opponent. And often when you're going on podcasts, you're trying to promote something. He didn't have anything to promote. we didn't need to pull anything out of him politically, socially. I just wanted to hear what it was like to be Daniel Cormier, what it was like to win that title, and man, we were really fortunate to get a vulnerable Daniel Cormier who was just completely candid. There you go. How did you do it? Did you always believe and know that you were going to be here? What's that like? What are the doubts like along that path?
You know, man, the crazy thing is, it's like when you deal with a lot of these things that I've dealt with, you know, especially the tragedies in life, you can either suck it up or you can say, you know what, my journey's done. You know, I knew that the best way to honor all the people that I've lost, especially Caden, was to do something truly, truly special. So use it as a motivating factor in my life, and that's what I've done. I feel like all the very close calls I had with becoming the best led to that moment on July 7th or July 9th when I fought St-Pierre.
Well, come on, that's the biggest event ever. Give or take a couple of days. I have a lot of things going on. I'm being chauffeured.
I'm trying to really make myself seem more busy than I am. I got to be honest with you. But I really did know the date. I did know the date. I was just pretending. You guys called me out on it.
I appreciate your candor.
But you know, I doubt myself. You know, I'm like, man, 39 years old. You know what the craziest thing was? Like, before the fight with Stipe, being that he was the guy that defended the belt 3 times and he was the most successful heavyweight champ of all time.
Yeah.
I'm in the back in the locker room, and I'm walking back and forth, and these are thoughts that I'm having to myself because my coaches and teammates are all excited. I'm telling myself, win or lose, I'm 39 years old. I'm done with this. I'm never fighting again. I don't need to deal with this anxiety. It's over. I was like trying to give myself reasons why I was gonna lose the fight. I was like, what is going on?
Number 4, not as tough as Daniel Cormier, Senator Ted Cruz. Particularly the first episode, 122, I think, and then it was then 271. He's been on a few times, but particularly the first one. And the reason for this was the first time he came on, it was after Carly Fiorina. He was a favorite, I think, at this point to become president. Not a favorite, but it was between him and Donald Trump, the Lion Ted. And it was a side to Ted Cruz that no one had seen before. We got so many comments like, I used to hate Ted Cruz. And then I saw this, and I realized he's actually a likable guy. And that's one thing I think that this show has provided, or at least I'm really grateful that we try to provide the opportunity to guests to let their freak flag fly, right? That's the opportunity. For Ted Cruz, I know he has to go on a debate, and he has to be professional, he has to be buttoned up, and unfortunately he has like an audiographic memory, is what I've heard, where that's why everything sounds like it's, but he's just that way. You can hear, when we talk to him off air, he's like, well, next time maybe we can grab a like, is there a consultant here?
Is this being recorded right now?
Is this being recorded? You're on candid camera. Okay, well, that's creepy. But the first interview, episode 122, he was actually a lot funnier than most people thought he would be. And he was a lot more relaxed. And that actually, I think, changed quite a few public opinions about him. This was, at the time, the Bernie bros and sort of the alt-right Pepe the Frog, and Ted Cruz wasn't really being examined by a lot of people. So it was interesting to me at that time to see that shift.
It doesn't pass a sniff test because either way it's a moment of silence. Do you yell, praise Jesus, praise Jesus, praise Jesus during Remembrance Day silence? Because I'd tell you to shut up.
Yeah. Look, a moment of silence is not that complicated to figure out how to do it.
You're funny. You're funny. You're good. Let that show a little more in the debates. I think people want to see that from you because you're good at it. And I dig it, man.
Well, thank you, Stephen. We're doing it all the time. When I'm on the trail, when we're doing town halls, this is what we're doing. The media doesn't show it.
Right.
As we move closer to the election, we'll communicate directly. But I'll give you something that was just a week ago. I was up in New Hampshire, did a breakfast meeting. And at the end of it, they asked me about my favorite movie. My favorite movie is The Princess Bride.
Oh, well, we're going to have to disagree on that one, but go ahead.
Well, then you may not like what I'm going to say next, but with a little bit of prodding, they got me to recreate the entire scene where Miracle Max is resuscitating the Dread Pirate Roberts. And so if you want to Google and see me doing impressions of Billy Crystal and Carol Kane and Carrie Elwes and Mandy Patinkin, that happened a week ago on New Hampshire television. And if you want to link to it, my guess is people may chuckle. But I will give one defense of myself.
All right.
A good impression is good. a bad impression is better. People laugh much more at a bad impression, and I do bad impressions very well.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. The number 3 actually was Joe Rogan. Episode, was it 123, Joe Rogan? I think it's episode 123. You can also find it on YouTube if you're watching this, of course. And again, send your favorite guests to us just in the comment section, or you can tweet it, and we'll see who we can get on the show. Yeah. Sometimes they don't want to come on the show.
Oh, yeah.
I don't blame them. But here's why with Joe Rogan. This happened on the heels of an appearance I made in the Joe Rogan podcast, and the appearance has now gone semi-viral, where we talked about marijuana. And my position, I don't want to get into this. My position is, I don't care if you want to smoke pot. I don't care if you want to get high. I couldn't care. I don't think that states not only should legalize whatever medical marijuana, if they want to legalize it, do whatever you, just know the ramifications, and just don't tell me it cures cancer. That's all. That's all. If states want to do it, that's my opinion.
Legalize crack.
Yes. I actually, honestly, if a state wants to legalize heroin, constitutionally, I find it hard to argue against it.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I don't like heroin personally. Anyway, so Joe Rogan
it's not for me.
got into on the show. It became pretty heated. And I know he didn't mean for it to be heated, and I didn't want for it to be heated. And after that, he was really great. He's always been so gracious as a host, Joe Rogan. And the reason this one, when he came on my show, meant a lot. A, he doesn't go on a lot of people's shows. B, the next day, and he did not have to do this, he released this apology on Instagram because he didn't feel good about how our interaction went. And he did not need to do that. I think it wasn't nearly as hostile as people wanted it to be, and that's why it went viral. And the reason him coming on the show, I think, is important. It means a lot to me. Is that sometimes public perception isn't reality. After that, I've done his show a few times, and they've always been fun. I've always had a good time with Joe, and I like him a lot, and I respect him a lot as a person and as a host. I mean, he's a trailblazer for podcasting. So I think for a lot of people, they thought that they had seen a feud, and for him to come on the show the next day and explain that there wasn't, he didn't need to apologize. It's not because he apologized. It didn't warrant an apology from him. But the fact that he kind of said, you know what, listen, I realize, you're in a place where a lot of people disagree with you. You're used to kind of having to protect yourself, be combative, and I didn't feel good about putting you in that position. He didn't do anything wrong, but it was cool to me, and I hope important to the viewer to see that sometimes a lot of these feuds, a lot of the gossip that you read, it's not real life. And so here you go, just a brief clip from Joe Rogan, who was very, very gracious and has done a lot for the program.
I don't think you're a conservative at all, but I think you're a free speech and a free thinking advocate, which kind of eliminates you from today's regressive left.
Isn't that bizarre? I mean, when I was a kid, my parents were hippies. And I grew up thinking that the left was all the people that were trying to stop this unjust war in Vietnam. And, they were trying to enable the civil rights movement to succeed and enable free speech and enable people to speak freely.
Right.
That's just not the case anymore. We're in some weird down is up and up is down time.
Yeah.
And for people like myself, who do have a lot of left-wing ideas, who do support gay marriage, who do support so many what you would consider left ideas.
Yeah.
You find yourself in this strange place where I'm so opposed to so much of these attacks on free speech and so much of the I don't even want to call it bullying because it's more of a mob mentality thing. It's kind of scary. Yeah. Like the Berkeley thing with Milo was scary.
Yeah.
And this mischaracterization of his positions on things is scary. They're making it out like he's this evil hate monger who wants genocide.
Right.
And this is all just to justify some of the crazy things that they're doing, smashing Starbucks windows, lighting cop cars on fire. All this chaos that you're seeing that's being perpetrated by the left. Someone like myself, I cannot identify with that. I do not understand it, and it puts me at odds. But, I'm like a man without a country now.
After that, I'm pretty sure he smoked weed. He would tell you himself.
Yeah.
Number 2, Ralph Macchio, episode 336. This is why, at one point, if you would have had Ralph Macchio, kind of like at one point before Desperate Housewives, if you were to say Terry Hatcher, people were like, well, that person from Lois and Clark, but then she became an A-lister again with Desperate Housewives. Yeah.
I mean, Dean Cain completely overshadows her in that show.
Yeah,
anyways,
Dean Cain. Dean Cain is just, he's prettier than Terry Hatcher, if that's possible. It is possible. I said it. I stand by it. As a matter of fact, he's so good looking that they relabeled on Netflix Lois and Clark lesbian cosplay. It's hard to find. So Ralph Macchio, at one point, if you'd say Ralph Macchio, you'd be like, well, come on. He was a big star in the 80s and 90s. But Cobra Kai had come out on YouTube Red, okay? And the reason this is number 2 and why it's so important to me, this is a pivotal moment for this show. And I think for online entertainment in general, for a lot of YouTube people out there, for podcasters out there, for people who've come, so it's this race to the middle. That's what people talk about. You know, you used to have Johnny Carson, right? That he was the only late night show at that point. And then it got split, and you had Letterman and Leno, and then you had shows after them. And then it was, okay, Letterman, Leno, and Conan, and the numbers went down. And now you have Colbert and Kimmel and Fallon and Conan, and I don't know.
Nobody's
if Lopez still has a show. But the point is, and then you have Samantha Bee and Trevor Noah. And so the networks, there used to only be 3. Then cable fragmented it, and their numbers have been doing this. At the same time, people who started online, YouTube, I mean, you can go check out I think my YouTube channel's been up since 2006. We didn't really upload anything back then. We've been doing this, and they've been doing this, and it's this race to the middle. When we started this show, you know, there were a lot of people who wouldn't come on the show, and rightfully so. And if they still don't want, rightfully so. I wouldn't. But it was so interesting. So Ralph Macchio is, I don't know his political persuasions at all. But what was interesting to me was at this point in time, we've said we're never going to have the ratings of I don't know, American Idol or Johnny Carson again. Well, actually, they do exist. They exist in the show Cobra Kai, YouTube Red. I think it was 30-something million.
Yeah.
A show?
Yeah.
I had
It's a
heard
good
36
show.
million. Yeah, 36 million people. It's a good show.
It's a great show.
It's a really, really good show. So not only do I love the show Cobra Kai, I highly recommend it. It's one of the few sort of comedies in recent memory that I can say works really well. Not only am I a Ralph Macchio fan, not only was he a good guest, but this was an interesting flip where at one point people who would be on ABC, CBS, NBC wouldn't come on a show like this. And now they would kill for the ratings that Cobra Kai was getting. And Ralph Macchio was the lead-in because he saw the value in reaching out to the audience who supported him with Cobra Kai. He came on this show. So it really was a changing of the guard. So episode 336. And one thing, too, a moment here that I really enjoyed was a lot of people don't realize Ralph Macchio is a really good actor. It's overshadowed by a lot. He's a really, really good actor, and so I wanted to ask him about a very specific moment that struck a chord with me in Karate Kid, and he told me off air that he really appreciated it, and I know it touched him, and I'm very grateful that he's been on the show. Ralph Macchio. It's such a great job for people who don't know what they're watching, because a lot of people, they just watch films and they see it from an entertainment standpoint. That's one shot. You're conveying a lot of different emotions. Anger to helplessness, to wanting to go to a karate school, the losing it in your voice. I always watch that scene and say, people don't realize how well performed this scene. How many takes did that take? And how did you get into that headspace? Because it really is something incredible to watch.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And it was even nice to just revisit that audio-wise, because you know, we watched this film a bunch of time over the years. That's the great Randy Heller also playing Mrs. LaRusso, who is a nice, without making spoilers, it's a nice Easter egg, and I just gave it away in our series. And we're hoping to have that role and other actors from back then, back in the future of the Cobra Kai show. The scene, we did it a bunch of times. Some of it was because the camera, some of it was on me, some of it was on the camera. We didn't get it perfect every single time. And I think if you actually watch that take, if you really analyze it, there's one point where the Steadicam just does a little bit of a wobble. Am I there? It should be back.
There we go. Okay, there's that wonderful point. Okay, so continue. You're saying the camera got a little crooked.
Right. So the camera got a little. It had a little wobble in it, and by technical perfection standards, you would say, let's go again. We have a little bit but the performance, credit the director. You always go with performance because that stuff falls away.
Right.
That stuff you don't notice. I think that scene did have a lot of levels. I mean, the whole, I hate this bike, this stupid bike. That was all John Avildsen saying. When you walk up, I think he was trying to help me get to that level.
Yeah.
And he had me walk down and keep throwing. He said, just keep throwing it in there. He said, go back, do it again. And he had the camera rolling, and I had to do it like 3 and 4 times sometimes per take, just pick it up. So on and on. He said, take it out again and do it again. And I think what he was doing, I'm sure what he was doing was getting me to that place of frustration and build all that level of emotion. The line when he says not at the Y at a real school was basically Ralph Macchio forgetting the line and figuring it out as I'm going.
At a good school.
I know what it's and so that.
You know what's funny? We quote that in our house all the time. When I was a kid, like if we had a problem or something, I'd be like, "I gotta take karate, Ma, not at the Y, at a good school." And it was
that's right. No,
it's sort of a line
great.
in the house.
I think it's a credit to all of us working together. A well-written scene, a fantastic director, a beautiful and wonderful actress to play opposite. We had a great chemistry together, and it's just one of those that we caught on film. You know, it doesn't always happen.
And he's still cute as a button, Ralph Macchio. I bet you Elizabeth Shue still get herself a piece of that. Now, the number one interview. All right, let's see if you can guess. I want put in the comment section your guess before.
Don't skip ahead.
Yeah, well, don't skip ahead.
Cheater.
Guess. 5, 4, 3. Okay, you've guessed. Then come back and let me know if you were right. The number one interview that I've ever conducted on this show that stands out is not a celebrity at all. Stephen Willeford. Yeah. I know a lot of you are probably saying who. So there was far deadlier actually than the Parkland shooting. One of the worst shootings mass shootings in modern history was in Sutherland Springs, outside of San Antonio, where a guy opened fire on a church, and he was stopped by a man who was an NRA certified instructor with an AR-15. That man was Stephen Willeford.
Badass.
Badass man. He's been he actually wasn't doing a whole lot of media. He did one local media appearance because someone was an actual friend of his who he worked with. But this was the first, and as far as I know it, the only one for a long time. As far as now my mouth is getting dry. So here, hold on, listen to this. This is what happens when it's live.
It's ASMR.
I don't even know what that means. Stop being disgusting. So Stephen Willeford, turned out he was a fan of the show. I think his daughter was a Mug Club member, and they reached out to us because we reached out and said, "Hey, listen, I know you're just being bombarded." He was holed up in his house effectively because press wouldn't leave him alone at that point, but they didn't really want to tell the story. They wanted to see kind of what had happened, but no one in the press was really covering that an NRA certified instructor took out a guy with an AR-15. And sure enough, sure as they came, the press was gone really, really quickly. That was a story that, like a fart in the wind, it was gone. And his daughter, I believe, spoke with our booker on the show and said, you know, it's really important that he go on a program where I trust that he'll be represented fairly and allowed to speak. And I really do think, as someone who's watched the show, I think this would be good for him. And so he did. He came on the show, and that was, you know, the reason it meant something to me was not because it was an exclusive, a scoop. I mean, that's always nice. I'm not going to lie and say that it wasn't a big deal that we had this exclusive, but it was really hard for me. I remember going into it saying to myself, I don't want to do the Barbara Walters thing. I don't want to make him cry. This is a guy who's just been through a traumatic event, who just shot somebody, who just had friends of his die, and I don't want to exploit it. But they did reach out to us and say this would be good for him to get this out and finally speak about it. And it was a real challenge to try and balance this interview. And you know, he started crying on air when describing this at one point, and it kind of reminded me of Tom Hanks in Punchline, where he's on stage asking someone to help him. And so I wanted to jump in and help him where I could, but give him the floor where he needed it. And a lot of people reached out and said, hey, we really appreciate that you did that and that we were able to hear his story, because no one had heard it from the media yet. And his family actually sent me some very nice messages, and they were very grateful. So it was hard for me not to cry. If you go back and watch the full interview, episode 257, Stephen Willeford, right after the Sutherland Springs shooting, it was very difficult for me to keep my composure, to try and handle this. You know, this is what happens sometimes in life. You're never prepared for it. You just have to do it. Most things, if you think about turning moments in your life, you're not prepared. You've just got to step up. And that's what happened here with Stephen Willeford. I did the best that I could. And seeing him at the end of this interview, when he was going through these harrowing details, a nightmare, and he was crying on air, I was very emotional, but then getting him to laugh a little bit. And that's what his family said, you know, meant a lot. That's what I can do every now and then. And it meant a lot for me to do, and it's something I'll never forget. Stephen Willeford.
To have that frame of mind and, like you said, that foresight, I know people are going to be asking, did this come with your NRA instructor training, military background? Because most people would not think to look for this, to be aware of your surroundings. It is remarkable.
Well, that's what I'm telling you. I can't explain the clarity of mind that I had. I can't explain it. And not only that, but I was using the neighbor's Dodge pickup truck. He had a 4-wheel drive Dodge pickup truck in his driveway, and I was using it. All he had for a shot for me is my head, because I was behind the truck and using it for cover.
Okay.
And we exchanged fire, and he hit the neighbor's car's windshield. He hit the neighbor's house, and he got into the vehicle, and I fired it again. And he fired 2 more shots through his side. Well, actually, he fired 2 shots through his side window first. And I noticed the 2 distinct pistol shots coming through the sides of the window. And I fired my AR-15 again, and it took the window down. It fell.
According to the media, people like you, people as pure-hearted and as capable, don't exist, and it is an unbelievable story. I mean, you're in it now, but you're a huge moment in history. What you did.
Can I say something? And I don't feel comfortable saying it just anywhere, but maybe with you guys.
Sure.
If I had run out of the house, and maybe this is a political plug or whatever, but if I had run out of the house with a pistol and faced bulletproof vests and Kevlar helmets, it might have been futile.
Right. I know.
And I ran out with an AR-15, and that's what he was shooting the place up with.
Right.
And I hate to politicize that, but that's reality. I was terrified, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm no brave man. I was terrified.
I can imagine. That's what makes you brave. You know, my dad told me that when I was young. Do you know what the definition of... He had that conversation with me. He said, do you know what brave is? I said, it means not being afraid. He said, no, it means doing the right thing in the face of being afraid. No one expects you to be fearless. No one expects you to go out there and be John Rambo. I would imagine that if it were me, I'd be yelling to my wife to get my brown pants. I would have long since soiled myself. There you go. Hey, at least I brought some laughter into that. Hopefully made your day a little brighter.
And he's been on the show since, by the way, also, Stephen Willeford. So we made sure to follow up. We weren't just, a lot of these, you know, kind of like David Hogg with those people. Then all of a sudden, everyone who supports David Hogg, where have they gone?
Gone.
So he has to start now bashing Nancy Pelosi. No, we've had Stephen Willeford on, and if ever he has something, he doesn't need to promote anything, so he doesn't really often request being on, but when he does, we have him on the program. And he's become, I would say that certainly him or his family members have become friends, and we're really fortunate to know them. So those are the top 10 interviews that stick out in my mind that I've conducted, that I've enjoyed the most, or that have impacted me the most. Comment, again, let me know what you think. What interviews stand out to you? What were your favorite, or which interviews maybe made an impact on you that changed your course of thinking, or maybe inspired you to do something that you thought you would never do? Comment. I want to hear from you, because that's a big part of this show. A big part are the guests, and man, they change people's lives, myself and everyone in the studio included. Thank you for watching. We're going to see you tomorrow with a normal show, or maybe a super video. Ooh. Who knows? Who knows? Stay tuned. Hey there, YouTube viewer. If you like this video, you first off should probably seek counseling, but you should subscribe or hit the notification bell or watch one of these videos that's playing. The truth is, I don't know what any of that means anymore. If you try and subscribe or hit the notification bell, you won't be notified. And if you try and click one of these videos, it's just going to take you to BuzzFeed Boldly Fat Broads as they get carried out of their houses where they had to break down the north wall, and they get carried out in a land whale tarp. I don't know what's happening on YouTube. I know what's happening with Mug Club. LouderWithCreditor.com/Mug Club. You get to watch The Daily Show 1 hour every single day, not just clips, along with like 15 other shows for $69 annually if you're a student and or veteran or military. And you get to keep us here on YouTube for free, because we can irritate them by your support. It's worth it, right?